In the opening scenes, we see a tearful girl driving a car. On the radio they talk about the local football star Mike Donaldson, who has come to attend the alumni meeting. She couldn't bear to hear Mike's name. Distracted for a few seconds from the road, the girl doesn't immediately notice someone ahead. In high school, Mike Donaldson, the most popular guy in school, and Shelby Mercer were a couple. However, after graduation, Shelby remained alone in their small town, while Mike went to college and found a new love, 21-year-old Elizabeth Mitchum. Like Mike, she is a student and is majoring in psychology. The couple is going to Pennsylvania for the weekend, Mike's hometown, and Elizabeth is very nervous about meeting his family. She really wants to make a good impression. Mike also has an exciting event ahead, the reunion of the high school football team. Their buddy Eddie, who is in love with Elizabeth, wished them luck. Shelby owns a small restaurant inherited from her parents. A bank employee approached her, reminding of debt obligations. Shelby promised to visit the bank tomorrow. Meanwhile, Elizabeth asked Mike if she should worry about his ex-girlfriend. Mike assured her that it's all in the past. Police officer Billy Fletcher, Mike's brother, walked into Shelby's restaurant and said hello to her. Shelby said she's nervous about meeting her boyfriend after 4 months of separation. Billy was sure that Mike and Shelby had broken up, but she said they just took a break. The football match has already started. Mike is thrilled to see all his old friends. The brother warned him that he saw Shelby today, who still thinks they are together. Mike thought Shelby was just joking, but Billy doesn't think so. After the match, Mike's friends invited him and Elizabeth bowling. Elizabeth gladly agreed, but Mike accepted the offer without enthusiasm. He admitted he didn't want to go because it's the restaurant owned by his ex-girlfriend's family. He also wonders why Shelby still thinks they are a couple. Elizabeth promised Mike that she would play along, and they went to the restaurant. The waitress told Mike that Shelby had been talking about him the whole time. Elizabeth advised her boyfriend to talk to Shelby straight. He thought it was a good idea. Shelby was waiting for Mike in the utility room. Seeing her beloved, she immediately rushed into his arms, but Mike pulled away, trying to explain that there was nothing between them anymore. Mike truly regrets leaving without explanation a few months ago, while Shelby was grieving her mother's passing. But now he has a new life. Hearing that Mike has a girlfriend, Shelby was speechless. Mike apologized and left. Meanwhile, Elizabeth received a call from Eddie, who is worried about her. Mike wanted to leave with his girlfriend right away, but Shelby approached them. She acted as if nothing had happened and offered Elizabeth a drink. When the girls were alone, Shelby told Elizabeth that she is genuinely happy for her and Mike. Both Mike and Billy were surprised that the girls found common ground so quickly. They drank and talked for a long time. When Elizabeth shared that she has a meeting with Mike's parents today, Shelby advised her not to show up drunk, since they were quite demanding people. It was late. After the restaurant closed before leaving, Mike thanked Shelby for being nice and wished her a good night. Elizabeth doesn't want to go to Mike's parents right away because she's afraid of making a bad impression. Mike tried to persuade the girlfriend to go home to his family, but Elizabeth insisted on staying in the nearest motel. Meanwhile, Shelby is smoking a lot, unable to hold back tears. Billy drove Elizabeth to the motel, but as it turned out, there are no available rooms because of the football tournament in town. The nearest hotel is 6 miles away. Elizabeth was going to call her boyfriend, but there's no cell phone network. So she remained alone with her luggage in an unfamiliar town. Meanwhile, Billy drove Mike home to their parents' house. The mother was overjoyed to see her son but was surprised that he came without his girlfriend. Mike promised to introduce them tomorrow. Elizabeth wandered along the night road, trying to reach someone. Spotting a car ahead, she gestured for the driver to stop. Behind the wheel was drunk Shelby, who couldn't brake in time. Frightened, Shelby immediately got out of the car and saw unconscious Elizabeth on the roadside. Shelby dragged her into the car, while Mike took down pictures of him with the ex-girlfriend from his room. Upon waking up the next morning, Mike immediately called Elizabeth. He was unaware that she was now at Shelby's house. When Shelby saw Mike's call on Elizabeth's phone, she didn't answer. Elizabeth was still unconscious. After the accident, Shelby provided her with first aid and even put her on N4. Shelby stared at her ex-boyfriend's new love for a long time. Mike was very surprised to see his brother at breakfast with the family. Billy reminded him that they had agreed to go fishing. As planned, the guys went fishing, deciding to pick up Elizabeth on the way back. Meanwhile, Elizabeth began to regain consciousness. Shelby sat next to her bed all this time. Seeing her, Elizabeth asked what happened. Shelby said she found her on the roadside and asked why Mike left her alone. Shelby knows from experience how irresponsible Mike can be. Once, he supposedly left her alone in the middle of the road, so Shelby understands Elizabeth. Since Shelby took care of her sick mother for a long time, there are still many medicines in her house. Elizabeth said she needed to leave, but it became obvious almost immediately that she wouldn't get far because of her injuries. Shelby assured Elizabeth that she had already left a message for Mike. Despite Elizabeth's protests, Shelby gave her a sedative injection. Meanwhile, the guys were fishing. Mike tried to reach Elizabeth, but in vain. He really has serious intentions towards her. During the day, Shelby returned to her restaurant as if nothing had happened. Reading Mike's message to Elizabeth, she turned off her phone. Elizabeth was calling for Shelby, but no one was home. Mike came to the motel and asked the receptionist in which room Elizabeth Mitchum had checked in. After checking the registration book, the receptionist said that no one with that name had checked into the motel. Mike is sure that something bad happened. Billy suggested that Elizabeth got scared of a serious relationship and decided to run away. However, Mike doesn't believe that. Despite her injuries, Elizabeth managed to get out of bed. There are photos of Mike hanging everywhere in Shelby's house. There are many other things reminding of him. It seems that Shelby is obsessed with Mike. It was at that moment that Elizabeth realized she was in danger. When Shelby returned, Elizabeth hurriedly lay back on the bed and pretended to be asleep. But Shelby guessed that the girl was not sleeping and began to accuse her of ingratitude. After that, Shelby put a lock on the door of the room, while Elizabeth cried. Later, Shelby sorted through the mail without even opening the envelopes of overdue bills. Soon, the electricity in her house would be cut off. Mike has no idea what to think. When the phone rang, he thought it was Elizabeth, but it was Shelby who suggested having lunch together. Mike decided to agree. Elizabeth is now Shelby's prisoner. She meanwhile closed her restaurant to have lunch alone with Mike. The guy looked upset and told Shelby that he hadn't seen Elizabeth since last night. Shelby said that supposedly yesterday Elizabeth told her that she wasn't sure about her relationship. She also mentioned her ex-boyfriend. Mike thought it was about Eddie. Completely upset, he left. At home, Shelby told Elizabeth about today's meeting with Mike. The room was quite cold because the heater wasn't working. Before leaving, Shelby gave Elizabeth another injection of sedative. But Elizabeth managed to outsmart her. The catheter was actually just under the blanket. Taking advantage of Shelby being outside, Elizabeth ran to the phone, but due to utility arrears it didn't work, plus Shelby caught her here. She started accusing Elizabeth of selfishness again and advised her to start respecting others' hospitality, or it would end badly for her. Elizabeth had no choice but to return to bed. Under the influence of sedatives, she quickly fell asleep. Shelby decided to rummage through her so-called guest's belongings and used her perfume. She also found a jacket with the number 7. It was Mike's number on the soccer team. Elizabeth was going to give him that jacket after meeting his parents. Mike went to his brother at the police station, but Billy hadn't found out anything yet. Suddenly, Mike received a message from Elizabeth, saying that she had gone back to college to think everything over. Mike tried to reach her, but the phone was out of range. He is convinced that Elizabeth left him because of Eddie. Billy advised his brother to forget about Elizabeth since there are many other beautiful girls around. Mike thought his brother was right and suggested going to the club tonight. Elizabeth told Shelby that she was meeting Mike today. It seems he is not too concerned about the absence of his girlfriend. At night in the club, Mike drank with his friends. Of course, Shelby was here too. She and Mike exchanged glances constantly while romantic music played. At some point, Shelby left, clearly hinting to Mike to follow her. And he did, unaware that Elizabeth was currently trapped in Shelby's house. There was passion between Mike and his ex-girlfriend, just like in the good old days. But at some point, Mike asked Shelby to stop. He wants to leave the past behind and move on. Elizabeth tried to escape through the window, but in vain. When Mike left, Shelby burst into tears. No matter what she does, Mike will never be with her again. Morning came. Mike still hopes that his beloved will text him. Shelby brought breakfast to Elizabeth, saying how she used to devote all her time to taking care of the mother. All Shelby had inherited were unresolved issues and debts. When the doorbell rang, Shelby knocked Elizabeth out. The bank employee stood on the doorstep. Shelby, pretending to be deliberately kind, let him in. The bank employee was here to remind Shelby of the need to pay off the debt. She promised to come to the bank yesterday but didn't. Elizabeth woke up with a terrible headache. Meanwhile, Shelby told the bank employee that she didn't come because she was busy renovating the house. If she and Mike decide to start a family, they will need a lot of space. The man had to remind Shelby that if she doesn't pay the bills, she will lose both the house and the restaurant. Seeing the man leave through the window, Elizabeth began tapping on the glass and calling for help. It seemed the man noticed her, but in the next moment Shelby appeared at the window. Elizabeth tried to convey to Shelby that no one can control everything. Elizabeth understands her and is willing to help, but those words only made Shelby angry. She ordered Elizabeth to stop this psychoanalysis and locked her in the bathroom. When Shelby was getting ready for her date with Mike, she found a note in the jacket that she had stolen from Elizabeth and was going to give to him in her own name. It was a message from Elizabeth asking for help. Seeing the note under the door, Elizabeth realized that her rescue plan had failed. Shelby drove away while Elizabeth desperately tried to get out. Mike was having fun with the friends and did not expect to see Shelby in his house. She joined the guys without an invitation. While trying to get out, Elizabeth discovered a package in the toilet tank with photos of Shelby's mother and medical reports. After examining the contents, Elizabeth realized that Shelby got rid of her own mother but managed to avoid responsibility. Elizabeth understands that she must escape at any cost. Shelby is a much more dangerous person than she could have imagined. Meanwhile, she took Mike outside and gave him the jacket with the embroidered number 7. Mike liked the gift, although he felt awkward. When Shelby tried to kiss him, he pulled away and once again tried to explain to the girl that it's over between them. Despite everything, Mike still has feelings for Elizabeth, and Shelby won't be able to change that. Mike doesn't know what to do and asked his brother for advice. Billy believes that Mike acted foolishly by leaving Shelby, as she loves him very much and is willing to do anything for him. Returning home, Shelby saw a mess in the bathroom. At that moment, Elizabeth attacked her from behind, knocking out, and then ran out of the house. However, due to her injured leg, the girl won't be able to get far. Shelby woke up and rushed in pursuit. Limping, Elizabeth reached the garage, hoping to escape by car. However, when she tried to open the car door, the alarm went off, thus giving her away. Sure enough, seconds later, Shelby was already here. In the next scene, we see Elizabeth unable to move, begging Shelby to spare her. Elizabeth's parents have money, so they could pay a ransom, but Shelby is not interested. Mike is all she wants. To prevent Elizabeth from escaping again, Shelby injured her leg. After that, she watched the prom video. It showed her and Mike in love and happy. Mike is getting ready for the important event. Despite doubts, he finally puts on the jacket given by Shelby. Meanwhile, she's also getting dressed up, preparing for a meeting with Mike. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. Elizabeth tries to call for help, but no one will hear her screams. Opening the door, Shelby saw Billy, who offered her a ride. Shelby said it wasn't a very good idea. Billy in turn said he was ashamed of how his brother treated her. Many guys dream of a girl like her, and Billy is one of them. Elizabeth managed to reach the electrical panel and cut off the power. Despite Shelby's protests, Billy was going to go down to the basement and check what was wrong. There he found Elizabeth. At that moment, Shelby attacked Billy, severely injuring him. Taking his gun, she fired. Mike and his family arrived for the official number assignment ceremony for the soccer team. Mike has no idea that his girlfriend is currently fighting for her life. Elizabeth saw through the gap between the boards as Shelby got rid of the evidence. After that, she calmly had lunch. While the coach was giving a speech on stage, Mike went to the restroom to clean himself up. Suddenly, he noticed the initials on the jacket, his and Elizabeth's. Obviously, it was Elizabeth who had embroidered it. The coach announced Mike's name, but instead of going on stage, he rushed outside, sending a voice message to his brother. Shelby is confident that nothing and no one can interfere with her happiness with Mike. At this moment, he ran straight to her house, unaware that his brother is no longer alive. When Mike knocked on the door, Shelby opened it. Mike demanded to know where Elizabeth was, but Shelby remained silent. Soon he found his beloved in the basement. At that moment, Shelby came out with a gun. If Mike doesn't belong to her, he won't belong to anyone. Mike tried to convince her not to do it, but Shelby shot anyway, injuring his leg. Despite everything, Mike managed to push Shelby away. Taking Elizabeth in his arms, he carried her away. Shelby followed them and attacked Mike. Elizabeth came to his aid, intent on getting even with Shelby. At that moment, fear and hatred fueled Elizabeth. Mike took his beloved away. Shelby loved him more than life, but it was not mutual. Thus, the story of the high school love turned into a tragedy. In the last scene, we see Shelby opening her eyes.